It was a typical Tuesday night in Los Angeles when everything started. The bright studio lights were blazing hot as usual, and the audience was packed with people ready to laugh. Behind the famous desk sat one of the most popular late-night TV hosts in America. His show had been running for almost 8 years, and millions of people watched him every single night. The host was known for his quick wit and sharp tongue. He never held back when it came to making jokes about celebrities, politicians, or anyone in the public eye. His writers always made sure to give him the best material, and tonight was no different. They had something special planned. As the cameras rolled and the red recording light came on, the host shuffled through his notes with that familiar smirk on his face. The audience could tell something big was coming. They leaned forward in their seats, phones ready to record the next viral moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, his voice carrying that theatrical tone that made him famous. "Tonight we need to talk about someone who's been in the news lately. Someone who, let's be honest, probably should have retired about 20 years ago." The audience started to chuckle. They knew this setup well. This was how the host always began his most brutal takedowns. Pictures of Clint Eastwood suddenly appeared on the big screen behind him. Recent photos from interviews and public appearances filled the backdrop. The audience immediately knew where this was going, and some people started laughing before the host even said another word. "Now, I have nothing against old movies," the host continued, gesturing toward the screen. "But when someone keeps showing up to events looking like they're auditioning for a mummy movie, maybe it's time to stay home." The audience erupted in laughter. Camera operators zoomed in on people, wiping tears from their eyes. The host was just getting started. He clicked his remote and a video clip began playing. It showed Eastwood giving a speech at a recent film festival. The legendary actor's voice was a bit shaky, and he moved slowly across the stage. Nothing unusual for someone his age, but the host saw it differently. "Look at this," the host said, pausing the video at an awkward moment when Eastwood was adjusting the microphone. "This man directed some of the greatest movies ever made, and now he can't figure out how a microphone works. It's like watching your grandfather try to use Netflix." More laughter filled the studio. Social media was already lighting up. People were sharing clips and screenshots faster than the show's producers could keep track of. The host wasn't done. He had his writers prepare an entire segment around this theme. They'd spent weeks gathering clips, photos, and material. This wasn't just a quick joke. This was a full comedy assault. "And don't even get me started on his political views," the host added, his voice taking on that mock-serious tone that his fans loved. "This guy's been talking about the good old days for so long, I think he actually believes he invented them." The audience was eating it up. Every joke landed perfectly. The timing was flawless. This was exactly the kind of content that made his show so popular with younger viewers. Behind the scenes, the show's producers were watching the social media numbers climb in real time. Twitter was exploding. Instagram stories were popping up everywhere. TikTok users were already creating response videos. This was exactly what they hoped would happen. The host pulled out his phone and pretended to scroll through it. "I was looking at his recent interviews online," he said, squinting at the screen like an old person trying to read. "And I found this gem where he talks about kids today not understanding hard work." He put on an exaggerated gravelly voice, mimicking Eastwood's distinctive way of speaking. "Back in my day, we didn't have participation trophies. We had participation bullets." The impression was spot on, and the audience lost it completely. Camera operators captured every reaction. People were doubled over laughing. Some were recording with their phones, which the producers loved. User-generated content meant free publicity for days. The segment kept going for almost 15 minutes. Usually, celebrity roasts lasted maybe 5 minutes at most, but this one had legs. The host could feel the energy in the room. He knew he had struck gold. "You know what the funniest part is?" the host asked, leaning forward conspiratorially. "He probably doesn't even know we're talking about him right now. Someone's grandson is going to have to explain the internet to him tomorrow morning." The laughter was so loud it nearly drowned out his next line. He had to wait for it to die down before continuing. I bet his idea of going viral is catching a cold, he added, delivering the punchline with perfect timing. As the segment finally wrapped up, the host looked directly into the camera. Clint, if you're watching this, and let's be honest, you're probably not because you're still trying to figure out how to turn on your TV. Just remember, this is all in good fun. We're just having a laugh at your expense. The audience gave him a standing ovation. They knew they had just witnessed something special. This wasn't just another celebrity roast. This felt bigger, more significant somehow. Within minutes of the show ending, clips were spreading across every social platform imaginable. The hashtag started trending immediately. News websites picked up the story. Entertainment blogs were writing articles before the West Coast broadcast even finished airing. The show's social media team worked overtime that night, sharing clips and engaging with fans. Every major moment from the segment got its own post. They knew how to milk content for maximum reach. By morning, the clips had millions of views. The show's YouTube channel saw its biggest traffic spike in months. Late-night comedy shows thrived on these viral moments, and this one was already shaping up to be legendary. Other comedians started weighing in on social media. Some praised the host for his fearless comedy. Others wondered if maybe he had gone too far this time. But controversy was good for business in the entertainment world. The host woke up the next morning to his phone buzzing with notifications. His agent was calling. Network executives were sending congratulatory emails. This was exactly the kind of buzz that networks loved. As he scrolled through the responses, he saw mostly positive reactions. His fans were sharing the clips with captions like "Savage" and "He went there." The younger demographic especially seemed to love it. Some older viewers weren't as amused, but the host had never really cared about appealing to that crowd anyway. His show was built for people who wanted edgy, boundary-pushing comedy. Playing it safe wasn't his style. Little did he know that his 15 minutes of comedy gold was about to set off a chain of events that would change everything. Sometimes, the biggest storms start with the smallest clouds, and this particular storm was just beginning to form on the horizon. The next morning brought numbers that made everyone at the network smile. The overnight ratings were through the roof. Social media engagement was off the charts. The show's official YouTube clips had already hit 2 million views each, and it wasn't even noon yet. The host walked into his office building feeling like a king. Security guards nodded at him with newfound respect. Assistants gave him thumbs up as he passed by. Even the coffee shop barista in the lobby gave him a free drink and said his show was trending on her Twitter feed. His agent called before he even reached his desk. "You absolute genius," she said, her voice practically singing through the phone. "Do you know what happened last night? We broke the internet. The network is ecstatic. They want more. More." That was exactly what the host wanted to hear. The writer's room was buzzing with energy when he walked in. Usually coming up with fresh material was like pulling teeth. But today everyone had ideas flowing like water. The whiteboard was already covered with potential jokes, sketches, and segments. "We could do a whole week of this," suggested the head writer, pointing at newspaper clippings and printed internet comments spread across the table. "Look at all this material. People are sending us clips, photos, old interview footage. It's like Christmas morning." The host picked up some of the submissions. Fans had dug up decades-old TV appearances, award show moments, and even behind-the-scenes footage from movie sets. The internet had become his personal research team, working for free. "What if we make this a series?" he asked, his eyes lighting up. "Not just random jokes here and there, a full-themed week. We could call it something catchy." The writer started throwing out names. Eastwood's Last Stand got the biggest laugh in the room. It was perfect, dramatic, slightly mean, but undeniably catchy. The kind of title that would trend on its own. That night's show opened with even bigger fanfare than usual. The host had commissioned special graphics, dramatic music, and even custom lighting. This wasn't just another comedy segment anymore. This was an event. "Welcome back to what the internet is calling the roast of the century," he announced to thunderous applause. "And since you all loved it so much last night, we decided to give you a whole week of it." The audience went wild. People were standing up, cheering, taking videos with their phones. The energy in that studio was electric. The show had hired an impressionist for the night, someone who specialized in old Hollywood voices. The guy came out dressed in a cowboy hat and leather vest, walking slowly and squinting like he was staring into the sun. His Eastwood impression was so good it was almost scary. "Well, howdy there, young folks," the impressionist drawled, getting every vocal inflection perfect. "I hear some city slicker has been talking about me on the television." Box, the audience couldn't contain themselves. Even the camera crew was trying not to laugh while they worked. The sketches kept coming. They did a fake movie trailer called Gran Torino 2 Electric Wheelchair. They created a mock interview where the impressionist kept falling asleep mid-sentence. They even did a segment where he supposedly tried to use modern technology, with hilarious results. Each bit was more elaborate than the last. The costume department went all out. The writers outdid themselves with increasingly creative scenarios. The whole production felt like a well-oiled comedy machine firing on all cylinders. Social media exploded again. But this time, it wasn't just fans sharing clips. Other celebrities started joining in. A popular young actor retweeted one of the sketches with crying, laughing emojis. A famous pop singer shared a video of herself watching the show and losing it at the impressionist. The network executives were practically dancing in their offices. Ad revenue was pouring in as more companies wanted to sponsor the show. The ratings were climbing every single night. This kind of viral success was exactly what they dreamed about. By Wednesday, major news outlets were covering the story. Entertainment magazines wrote full articles about the comedy war. Blog posts analyzed every joke, every impression, every audience reaction. The host found himself in the middle of a cultural moment. "We've created a monster," joked the head writer during their daily meeting. "A beautiful, ratings-grabbing monster." The host was riding high. He started each show by reading comments from social media, picking the funniest reactions from fans. He would scroll through his phone on air, sharing the best memes and response videos that people had created. "This one's my favorite," he said, holding up his phone to show a TikTok video. "Some kid made a compilation of our impressionist set to hip-hop music. It has 3 million views already." The audience ate up every moment. They felt like they were part of something bigger than just a TV show. They were participants in a cultural event, witnesses to comedy history being made. Guest celebrities started asking to be part of the fun. A-list actors would call the show's bookers, wanting to come on and add their own jokes to the pile. It became the hottest ticket in Hollywood. Everyone wanted to be associated with the viral sensation. Thursday night brought the biggest surprise yet. A major movie star showed up unannounced and joined in with his own Eastwood impression. He had props, costume pieces, and even choreographed movements. The bit went on for almost 10 minutes and brought the house down. "I've been practicing this all week," the movie star admitted after the segment. "My kids showed me the clips, and I knew I had to be part of this." The internet couldn't get enough. Compilation videos were being made faster than anyone could count them. Meme pages dedicated entire posts to screenshots from the show. Fan art was popping up everywhere depicting the host as some kind of comedy superhero. Behind all the laughter and success, something interesting was happening. The relentless nature of the jokes was starting to feel different. What began as playful roasting was becoming something more intense, more personal. But the ratings were too good, the attention too addictive, and the momentum too powerful to stop. The host noticed some comments online questioning whether things had gone too far, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming positive response. For every person who suggested maybe enough was enough, there were 100 more begging for the jokes to continue. "Why stop when we're winning?" he asked his team during Friday's planning meeting. "The audience wants more. The network wants more. The advertisers want more. We'd be crazy to slow down now." The writers nodded in agreement. They had never experienced success like this. Their jokes were being quoted by millions of people. Their sketches were being shared across every platform. This was the kind of career-defining moment that comedians dream about. As Friday night's show wrapped up the themed week, the host looked directly into the camera with that confident smirk that had made him famous. "Well, folks, that's a wrap on our special week," he announced. "But don't worry, something tells me this story isn't over yet." He had no idea how right he was. While the entertainment world celebrated his comedic triumph, somewhere in California, the subject of all these jokes was watching everything unfold with the quiet patience of someone who had learned a thing or two about timing over the decades. The weekend after the comedy week ended, something strange happened. Nothing. Absolutely nothing from the man who had been the center of all the jokes for 7 straight days. No angry phone calls to the network. No lawyers sending threatening letters. No furious interviews with entertainment reporters. Just complete silence. The host found this silence more confusing than satisfying. He had expected some kind of reaction by now. Maybe a grumpy statement from a publicist or at least a sarcastic comment from someone in Eastwood's camp. But there was nothing. It was like shouting into an empty canyon and hearing no echo back. Monday morning brought fresh energy to the writers' room, but also a nagging question that nobody wanted to ask out loud. Where was the pushback? Where was the drama that usually followed this kind of public roasting? Maybe he doesn't even know about it, suggested one of the younger writers. I mean, he's in his 90s. Does he even use the internet? The head writer shook his head. Trust me, someone told him. You don't become a Hollywood legend by being clueless about what people are saying about you. Still, the silence was unsettling. In the entertainment world, silence usually meant one of two things. Either the person didn't care enough to respond, or they were planning something big. Given Eastwood's reputation, nobody was betting on the first option. Meanwhile, outside, a modest office building in Carmel, California, news vans started appearing like mushrooms after rain. Reporters had driven up from Los Angeles, flown in from New York, and even arrived from international outlets. Everyone wanted to get the first statement, the first reaction, the first sign of life from the man at the center of the storm. But the building remained quiet. Employees came and went through a side entrance, avoiding the cameras completely. Security guards politely but firmly kept reporters at a distance. A simple sign on the front door read, "No interviews at this time." Reporters tried everything. They approached people leaving the building, hoping to catch assistants, friends, or business partners. They got nothing but polite no comments and gentle headshakes. It was like trying to interview a ghost. One persistent reporter managed to track down a local coffee shop owner who claimed Eastwood was a regular customer. "He comes in every Tuesday and Friday," the shop owner said, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. "Orders the same thing every time. Black coffee and a blueberry muffin. Never bothers anybody and nobody bothers him." "Has he been in since the TV show started making jokes about him?" the reporter pressed. The shop owner paused, considering whether to answer. "He came in Tuesday like always. Looked the same as ever. Didn't seem upset or anything. Just got his coffee and left." This tiny piece of information became a major news story within hours. Eastwood spotted getting coffee. A mid-comedy controversy ran as a headline on multiple entertainment websites. The fact that this was considered newsworthy showed just how desperate everyone was for any reaction. Back at the TV show, the host was starting to feel frustrated. He had prepared for angry responses, legal threats, or at least some kind of dramatic comeback. The silence was taking all the fun out of it. "What's the point of roasting someone if they don't fight back?" he complained to his producer during a planning meeting. "It's like punching a pillow. There's no satisfaction in it." His producer suggested they might want to move on to other targets, but the host wasn't ready to let go. The ratings had been too good. The response too positive. He felt like he was sitting on a gold mine, but the mine had suddenly gone quiet. That night's show opened with the host addressing the elephant in the room. "So," he said, settling behind his desk with his usual grin, "it's been over a week since we started our little tribute to a certain aging cowboy, and we still haven't heard a peep from him." The audience chuckled, but the energy felt different somehow. The excitement of the previous week had cooled slightly. "I'm starting to think maybe he really doesn't know about modern technology," the host continued. "Someone probably needs to send him a telegram. Is Western Union still a thing?" The jokes landed, but they felt forced. The magic of the previous week was harder to recapture without the element of surprise and novelty. Behind the scenes, the show's social media team was tracking online conversations carefully. While the clips were still getting good engagement, some people were starting to ask questions. Comments like, "When is he going to respond?" and "This is getting kind of mean" were appearing more frequently. The network executives were also starting to wonder about the direction of the show. The ratings were still strong, but they were beginning to plateau. More importantly, some advertisers were asking quiet questions about the tone of the content. "We love controversy," one advertising executive told the show's sales team during a private call. "But we also like to know when it's going to end. Our brand doesn't want to be associated with something that drags on too long." Meanwhile, in Carmel, something was indeed happening, but nobody on the outside knew about it. Behind the closed doors of the quiet office building, meetings were taking place. Phone calls were being made to old friends throughout Hollywood. Quiet conversations were happening with people who had worked with Eastwood for decades. A longtime collaborator, a veteran film producer who had worked on several Eastwood movies, received one of these calls. Years later, he would describe the conversation as the most measured and thoughtful discussion he had ever had about handling public criticism. He wasn't angry, the producer would recall. He was thinking, really thinking about what this whole situation meant and how to handle it properly. That's the thing about working with him all these years. He never rushes into anything without considering all the angles. Legal advisors were consulted not about lawsuits or cease and desist letters, but about more practical matters. What were the boundaries? What constituted fair commentary versus something more problematic? The conversations were professional and calm, which somehow made them more concerning than angry threats would have been. A small team of trusted professionals was quietly assembled. A media consultant who specialized in crisis communications, a video production company that had worked on several documentary projects, a public relations expert who understood both traditional media and modern social platforms. But perhaps most importantly, phone calls were made to military veterans, fellow actors and community leaders who had known Eastwood for years. These weren't strategy sessions about revenge or retaliation. They were conversations about values, about dignity, and about the right way to respond when someone attacks your character. Back at the TV show, the host was growing more frustrated with each passing day. By Thursday, he decided to double down on his approach. If silence was Eastwood's strategy, then he would make the silence part of the joke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced during his monologue, "it's been almost 2 weeks since we started our educational series about aging in Hollywood, and our star pupil still hasn't turned in his homework." He gestured to an empty chair that had been placed on stage. "We even set up a special seat for him, just in case he wanted to come defend himself, but apparently he's too busy yelling at clouds to make the trip." The audience laughed, but some people in the crowd looked a bit uncomfortable. The joke felt meaner than funny, more like bullying than clever comedy. That night, social media showed the first real signs of a shift in public opinion. While many people still found the jokes entertaining, others were starting to question the one-sided nature of the whole situation. "It was funny at first," wrote one Twitter user, "but now it just feels like picking on someone who isn't fighting back." Another comment that gained traction read, "When did we decide it was okay to mock people just for being old?" The host's team noticed these comments but dismissed them as a vocal minority. The majority of responses were still positive, and the ratings remained strong. They had no way of knowing that somewhere in California, a response was being carefully crafted that would change everything. It was a quiet Thursday morning when everything changed. At exactly 9 a.m. Pacific time, something appeared on the internet that nobody saw coming. No press release, no announcement, no warning, just a simple video posted across multiple platforms, simultaneously. The thumbnail showed a familiar face sitting calmly behind a simple wooden desk. The title was just 4 words, a response to critics. Within the first hour, the video had already started spreading like wildfire. People were sharing it before they had even finished watching it. The comment sections were filling up so fast that the platforms could barely keep up. The video opened with no fancy graphics, no dramatic music, no flashy editing. Just a man in his 90s, sitting comfortably in what appeared to be his home office. Books lined the shelves behind him. A few family photos sat on the desk. Everything about the setting felt genuine and personal. When he began to speak, his voice was clear and strong. There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, no hint of the fury that many people expected. Instead, there was something much more, powerful dignity. "I've been in this business for over 60 years, he began, looking directly into the camera with those famous eyes that had stared down countless movie villains. "In that time, I've learned a thing or two about how to handle criticism." He paused, letting the words sink in. Even through a computer screen, his presence was commanding. "Some folks have been having some fun at my expense lately," he continued, with a slight smile. "And that's okay. Comedy has always been part of entertainment. I've got no problem with people making jokes." The early viewers were already surprised. This wasn't the angry old man response that everyone had predicted. This was something completely different. "But I thought maybe it was time to share a few stories of my own," he said, his hands folded calmly on the desk. "Stories about the people I've worked with, the things I've seen, and the values that have guided me through all these years." What happened next was unlike anything anyone expected. Instead of defending himself or attacking his critics, he began telling stories. Real stories from his decades in Hollywood and his time in the military. He talked about working with struggling young actors who went on to become major stars. He shared memories of film sets where everyone worked together like family, regardless of age, race, or background. He described moments of genuine human connection that happened behind the cameras. "I remember working with a young man who was so nervous about his first big scene that his hands were shaking," Eastwood said, his voice taking on a warm, grandfather-like tone. "I told him the same thing my sergeant told me back in the Army. The only way to get through fear is to walk straight through it." That young man went on to win 3 Academy Awards. The stories kept coming, each one more touching than the last. He talked about visiting wounded veterans in hospitals, about quietly paying for struggling actors' medical bills, about mentoring young directors who nobody else would give a chance to, but he didn't stop there. The video showed clips that most people had never seen before, behind-the-scenes footage from movie sets where Eastwood was helping crew members, joking with extras, and treating everyone with respect regardless of their position. There were testimonials from actors, directors, and crew members spanning 5 decades. A famous actress talked about how he had stood up for her when studio executives wanted to replace her. A veteran cinematographer described how Eastwood had visited him in the hospital when he was battling cancer. "He never talks about this stuff," the cinematographer said in the video. "He just does it. That's who he is." The video showed his humanitarian work that most people knew nothing about. His support for veteran organizations, his quiet donations to disaster relief efforts, his work with young filmmakers who needed mentorship and guidance. Military veterans appeared in the video talking about what his service had meant to them. Not the Hollywood version of military service, but the real thing. The sacrifices, the brotherhood, the lessons that shaped a generation of young men. "People today don't understand what it was like back then," said one elderly veteran. "We came back from overseas to a country that wasn't always happy to see us. But guys like Clint, they understood. They were there for us when nobody else was." The video quality was professional but not flashy. Everything about it felt authentic and heartfelt. There were no attack lines, no angry comebacks, no attempts to embarrass anyone. Just story after story of a life well lived. About halfway through the 12-minute video, Eastwood addressed the elephant in the room directly. "Now, I know some people think I'm too old to be relevant anymore," he said with that characteristic slight smile. "And maybe they're right about some things. I certainly don't understand all this new technology the way young folks do." He gestured toward the camera. "Took me 3 tries just to figure out how to record this thing properly." The comment was so genuine and self-deprecating that it was impossible not to smile. This wasn't a bitter old man lashing out. This was someone who could laugh at himself while still maintaining his dignity. "But age has taught me a few things too," he continued. "It's taught me that respect isn't something you lose just because you get older. It's taught me that wisdom comes from experience, not from how many followers you have on social media. And it's taught me that the measure of a person isn't how loud they can shout, but how they treat others when nobody's watching. The video showed more clips of him on movie sets, always calm, always professional, always treating people well. Co-stars talked about his generosity, his kindness, and his unwavering work ethic. "I've been blessed to work in an industry that's given me more than I ever deserved," Eastwood said near the end of the video. "I've worked with the best actors, directors, and crew members in the world. I've told stories that mattered to people. I've served my country when it needed me. And I've tried to live my life with dignity and respect for others." He leaned forward slightly, his voice becoming more personal. "To the young man who's been making jokes about me on television, I want you to know that I hold no grudges. Comedy is your job, and you're good at it. Your timing is excellent, and your writers are talented. But I hope someday you'll understand that getting older isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be grateful for." The final moments of the video showed a montage of his work spanning decades, not just the famous movie scenes, but the quiet moments, the charitable work, the mentorship, the genuine human connections. "I'm 94 years old," he concluded, looking directly into the camera one last time. "I've lived through more than most people ever will. I've made mistakes, learned from them, and tried to do better. I've loved deeply, worked hard, and treated people fairly. If that makes me old-fashioned, then I'm proud to be old-fashioned." The video ended with a simple message on screen: "Respect has no expiration date." Within minutes of the video ending, the internet exploded. But this time, the explosion was completely different from what had happened with the comedy segments. This wasn't about laughs or entertainment. This was about something much deeper. The comment sections filled up with people sharing their own stories about respect, dignity, and what it means to grow older. Veterans shared memories of their service. Young people talked about their grandparents. The conversation had shifted from mockery to meaning in less than 15 minutes. The host's phone started ringing before he had even finished watching the video. His agent, his producer, his network executives, his publicist, everyone wanted to know what he was going to do next. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't have an answer ready. The first sign that everything had changed came within 3 hours of the video going live. The host was sitting in his office, still trying to process what he had just watched, when his assistant knocked on the door with a worried look on her face. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her tablet. "The comments on our social media pages are different." He grabbed the device and started scrolling through the responses to their latest posts. What he saw made his stomach drop. The usual flood of laughing emojis and supportive comments had been replaced by something completely different. "This isn't funny anymore," read one comment with hundreds of likes. "That video made me think about my own grandfather. Maybe we went too far." Another highly liked response said, "I used to think this was hilarious, but after seeing that response, I just feel bad. That man has more class in his little finger than most people have in their whole body." The pattern was consistent across every platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Everywhere the show had posted content, the tide of public opinion was shifting dramatically. Comments that had been overwhelmingly positive just days before were now being met with pushback from the same audiences that had been cheering the jokes. By evening, the situation had gotten much worse. Major sponsors started making quiet phone calls to the network. They weren't threatening to pull out immediately, but they were asking questions. Lots of questions. "We're getting calls from 3 of our biggest advertisers," the show's producer told him during an emergency meeting. "They want to know what our response is going to be. They're worried about being associated with content that's making them look bad." The network executives were in full panic mode. The show had been their golden child just a week ago, bringing in record ratings and viral social media engagement. Now it felt like they were holding a ticking time bomb. "We need damage control, and we need it fast," said the head of programming during a conference call that stretched past midnight. "The video has 15 million views already, and it's still climbing. Every major news outlet is covering it. We're on the wrong side of this story now." The host spent a sleepless night trying to figure out his next move. He watched Eastwood's video over and over, looking for something to criticize, some angle he could use to fight back. But every time he watched it, he felt worse about his own behavior. The next morning brought devastating news. the show's overnight. Ratings had taken a massive hit. For the first time in months, they had lost viewers to their main competitor. More importantly, the demographic breakdowns showed they were losing their core audience, the young, social media-savvy viewers who had driven their recent success. "People aren't just not watching," explained the ratings analyst during the morning meeting. "They're actively avoiding us. Our social media engagement is down 60% from last week. The clips from our recent shows are getting more dislikes than likes." The host tried to put on a brave face during that night's taping, but everyone could tell his heart wasn't in it. His usual sharp wit felt forced. His timing was off. Even his most loyal fans in the studio audience seemed subdued. He attempted a few mild jokes about the situation, testing the waters to see how people would react. The response was lukewarm at best. The energy that had made his show electric just days before had completely evaporated. Meanwhile, Eastwood's video continued to spread across the internet like nothing anyone had seen before. It wasn't just entertainment news anymore. Major newspapers were writing editorials about it. Morning talk shows were discussing it. Even international media outlets were covering the story. But more than the media coverage, it was the personal responses that really made the difference. Thousands of people started sharing their own stories about older family members, about respect, about what it means to treat people with dignity regardless of their age. Veterans groups posted the video on their official pages. Military families shared it with pride. Young people started posting pictures with their grandparents talking about the wisdom and experience that comes with age. The conversation had completely shifted from entertainment to something much deeper and more meaningful. What had started as a comedy bit had accidentally touched on issues that millions of people cared deeply about. Within a week, major Hollywood figures started speaking out, not with angry statements or demands for apologies, but with thoughtful comments about respect and dignity in the entertainment industry. A legendary actress who had worked with Eastwood decades earlier posted a long message on social media about his character and professionalism. "In all my years in this business," she wrote, "I've never met anyone who treated people with more respect, regardless of their position or status." Other celebrities followed suit. Directors shared stories about his mentorship. Co-stars talked about his kindness. Veterans described his quiet support for military causes. The narrative that emerged was of a man who had spent decades lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The host found himself in an impossible position. Every option seemed to make things worse. If he apologized, it would look like he was only doing it because of the backlash. If he doubled down on the jokes, he would appear tone-deaf and cruel. If he ignored the situation, he would seem cowardly. His legal team advised him to be very careful with any public statements. While nothing he had said was technically illegal, the shift in public opinion had created new risks. Sponsors were nervous, network executives were worried, and the court of public opinion had clearly rendered its verdict. The decision came from the network, not from him. On a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after the comedy segments first aired, he got the call he had been dreading. "We're going in a different direction," the network executive said, using the polite corporate language that everyone in Hollywood understood. "The show's been a great success, but we think it's time for some changes." The cancellation wasn't announced with fanfare or drama, just a quiet press release buried on a Friday evening, when most people weren't paying attention to entertainment news. After much consideration, the network has decided to end the current run of the late-night show to pursue new programming opportunities. But by then, the damage was already done to more than just one TV show. The entire incident had sparked a much larger conversation about how society treats older people, about the difference between humor and cruelty, and about what it means to respond to criticism with grace rather than anger. Eastwood never gave another interview about the situation. He never gloated about the show's cancellation or made any public comments about winning some kind of victory. He simply went back to his quiet life in Carmel, continuing to work on his films and support the causes he cared about. The host eventually found work with a smaller network, hosting a much more subdued show with a fraction of his previous audience. He learned to be more careful with his comedy, understanding that in the age of social media, words can have consequences that last far longer than the laughter they generate. Years later, when people talked about the incident, it wasn't remembered as a comedy controversy or an entertainment industry battle. It was remembered as a masterclass in dignity, a perfect example of how to respond to criticism with grace, and a reminder that respect and wisdom never go out of style. The video response became something of a legend in itself, studied by communication professionals and cited by people facing their own public challenges. It proved that sometimes the most powerful response to mockery isn't anger or retaliation, but simply living your values out loud for everyone to see. In the end, the real shock wasn't that an older man could handle criticism from a younger comedian. The real shock was how a simple, honest response could change an entire conversation and remind everyone what true strength really looks like.